Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa, and I am joined here with Maggie Moroff. We're going to be presenting School Busing 101 today. I'm going to pause the recording for a second while we let people in and while we launch some polls, and then we'll get started. Hello again, this is Liliana Diaz-Pedrosa. I am the director of the Parent Center at Advocates for Children, and today I'm going to be co-presenting on School Busing 101 with
Hi, everybody. Maggie Moroff, the Senior Special Education Policy Coordinator at Advocates for Children of New York. Glad to be here.
Thank you. And let's get this going. All right. So first things first, an overview of our presentation. We're going to talk a little bit about Advocates for Children. Then Maggie's going to be discussing kinds of transportation available in New York City, exceptions to the rules of transportation. And then I'm going to be talking about the New York City Student Account Parent Portal, getting help, and the final reviews. In the middle, there'll be some other times to take questions. As I mentioned earlier, we're not going to be taking live questions during the recorded session. We're going to be taking questions through the Q&A feature, although some of those questions we're going to be answering live. And let's see. So what is Advocates for Children? So we are an independent agency that protects the rights of all New York City students. We are completely centered in education and in New York City families. We offer some main services, and they're all free. We offer a helpline that works 4 days a week, Monday through Thursday, 10 in the morning until 4 in the afternoon. We offer language services through our helpline. So if you contact us and you have more comfort in a different language, you can always offer you a language line interpreter to assist you in communicating with us. We have a ton of guides and resources that are quite searchable on our website at advocatesforchildren.org. We offer free workshops and trainings, webinars, or in person upon request. And we offer free legal services on issues around education to income-eligible families. The first step is always for you guys to call us. So please feel free if you have any questions about anything that has to do with education in New York City, give us a call. We'll try to offer you resources and guidance. You can also, like I mentioned, check on our website for a ton of resources that we have, some which we're going to be making reference to today. But if you're curious about other subjects that we're not discussing today, we really have a very, very rich source of information, and we try to do our best to create more as we go along. And we have additionally recorded workshops like this one. So I think our most recent one was on placement, but the Back to School 2024 Troubleshooting and Live Q&A was actually a lot of fun. So feel free to go back to that one and check out the resources for it. And now on to Maggie.
Okay, I'm going to take over for a while. I am going to talk to you. Today's webinar is about transportation. I'm going to talk to you now about the different ways that students can get transportation to their schools and how to navigate them. And then, as Liliana said, she's going to pick it back up for a while. So the first is stop-to-stop busing. This is stop meaning there's a stop where one or more students are waiting for the bus. It is not as individualized. It's the big yellow bus that many of us took to school when we were younger. This option is based on grade level, so students from kindergarten through 6th grade, and on travel distance. So for students who are in kindergarten through 2nd grade, they need to live at least a half a mile away from their school. And for students in grades 3 through 6, they need to live a mile away from their school. The second green bar, the public school does need to be in the same district. If it's a public school, if it's a non-public school, a charter school, or one of the citywide gifted programs, it needs to be in the same borough in order to sort of engage this sort of transportation. This is unlike what we're going to talk about in a minute, where busing is mandated. This depends on a bus being available and a route being available. Sometimes it's possible for the DOE to add a bus stop to an existing route, right? Since it's not stopping in front of individual students' homes or where they are staying at any given time. It is a little bit more flexible. It is bigger. It's the kind of busing we see when we watch movies and the kids are all on the bus. Next slide is a little bit more specialized. So this is curb to school busing. and it is intended for students who have transportation mandated either under special education on an IEP plan, an individualized education program, or on a 504 plan, or one of the OPT approved medical and other exceptions. I'm going to talk in a minute about those. What this means, and it's a little different, it means that the bus picks the student up at the curb by their home. So not at a stop in the neighborhood, but closer to home. And it drops them off at their school. Same thing in the reverse at the end of the day. We refer to it as specialized transportation, as does the DOE often. It is possible, even under this, to get one-way transportation to an after-school location other than home. The trick here is that the busing in the morning has to go to the school, and the busing in the afternoon has to leave from the school. And then there is a process for asking for an alternate drop-off that may or may not be available, depending on a number of factors. But I think the important thing to note here is that the curb to school busing is really getting the student picked up from and dropped off at sort of the closest distance to home and school, obviously. Next slide. Okay, this year, most students, not all, there are exceptions, are being given Omni cards. This is a replacement for the Metro cards that students used to get. It's also a little more expansive. So it's available for all students who live more than a half mile away. I was in an exchange with another advocate this morning. There's an advocacy point that I think some people are going to be working on around making sure that even students who have specialized busing also have access to the Omni cards, because they're kind of great. They're provided at the student school. They allow the student to take 4 rides daily at from anywhere to anywhere. So unlike the slide before, where the student's being moved from home to school and school to home or after school location, these can be used anywhere. They can be used on weekends. They can be used on vacations, including summer vacation. And it's a tap and go system, but it does require the Omni card. Next year, the DOE says they're hoping to move towards students using their phones. They're available on all New York City buses and trains, including the express buses, and they are available, as I said, anytime, so 24/7. We will be doing some advocacy, I hope, around sort of making that even more expansive to include the kids that are left out now. Yeah, next slide, sorry. Okay, I mentioned before that there are some exceptions to general eligibility for busing. So in addition to that bottom middle square where busing is mandated on a student's IEP or 504 plan, there are other students who might be eligible for transportation. They include students in temporary housing, students in foster care, students who are in legal joint custody situations, students who are victims of a crime or have an order of protection that keeps them from riding the subway line or walking to school. And then hazard exceptions. I just learned recently that hazard exceptions are when there's a traffic related hazard. So for example, there are no sidewalks for the student to walk to school on, but they still live closer to school. They may be able to get busing. For the joint custody situation, I want to note that the student needs to already be eligible for busing. And if there is an arrangement, the exception to go to and from both places can be requested. If one of the parents is living in a place that wouldn't otherwise be eligible for busing, then it's only going to apply to the parent who does, but it is possible that the student doesn't need to travel back to one house every single day in order to be picked up from one consistent location in this instance. Next slide. I want to talk a little bit about students in temporary housing. Those students can get free transportation until the end of the school year in which they are permanently housed. So if they move from temporary housing to permanent housing, they can continue their busing through to the end of that year. Or if they're in the last grade of their school, they're in elementary school and they are in fifth grade, they can get it through to the end of that year. If there's no bus service, this is like the big bus slide, the first one that I talked about. If there's no bus service available to their school, they are, like all students, entitled to get the Omni cards. Their parents and guardians are also entitled to Omni cards. They will be getting them at the school. All of the Omni cards, I can't remember if I said this before, get requested from the school staff, so in the front office at the school. Parents can this way ride with their children, and they'll be able to use their cards as well. Similar rules for students in foster care. Next slide. They are going to be eligible for transportation to and from school, and then, like all other students, they're going to be entitled to the Omni cards if bus service isn't available for them. Okay. We're going to move into IEP mandated busing for students with disabilities who require transportation. Just because a student has a disability does not mean that they automatically qualify for busing, but it is going to be an individualized decision, just like all of special education services are supposed to be. If busing is listed on a student's IEP, the New York City Public Schools, NYCPS, I'm going to go back and forth today probably between NYCPS and DOE. We're talking about the same entity. If it's listed on a student's IEP or 504 plan, the DOE needs to provide it along with any accommodations on the IEP, and we'll talk about those accommodations in a minute. The DOE may require forms from the doctor, usually a medical accommodations request form known as a MARF. It's such an ugly word, but before the IEP meeting. So it's going to be a discussion. It is not going to be automatic. At the time of the IEP meeting, parents and their advocates are going to want to make sure to discuss transportation and to have filled out the forms ahead of time, bring the forms with you, really make sure that the transportation needs and accommodation for transportation needs are discussed and noted in the transportation section of the IEP. Like everything else special education, if it's not on the IEP, the school is not likely to provide it. If it is on the IEP, they are going to be required to provide it in most instances. And it's going to be easier for you to enforce if there's a problem. There is a point of contention right now that we've seen in cases that we've been working on this week, where there is something written on the IEP, like the need for a minibus, and the DOE is answering back that the Office of Student Health hasn't yet approved those, and so there's some back and forth on that. Make sure you fill out the forms, make sure that your doctors fill them out correctly, make sure you submit them, make sure you bring copies to your IEP meeting, and make sure that everything gets written on the IEP. It's going to make everything a whole lot more enforceable later on. If the IEP calls for a para or a nurse to ride with a student on the bus, and there isn't one provided, or there's one provided, but their attendance is spotty, you're going to have to work not with the Office of Pupil Transportation, but the Office of Special Education around that. It is still a busing related concern, and so I wanted to raise it here and just flag that for you. Let's go to the next slide. Okay, I've mentioned a few times accommodations around transportation. There are obviously accommodations that a student can get in school. We're talking right now about the ones that they need to safely and comfortably ride the bus. These need to be listed on the IEP as well. And these, what you see here on the slide, are really the ones that we see. So one-on-one transportation, paraprofessionals, which I just spoke about, specialized vehicles, medical or nursing services, limited travel time. We'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute. Climate control, so making sure that there is AC and heat. Porter services, if a student has accessibility and mobility needs, where somebody needs to literally help the student from the home into the bus. Safety vests and car seats. We're going to talk in a minute about preschool students, and some of this is a little bit more automatic for them, but all of these should be on the IEP no matter what. As I said on the last slide, if it's on the IEP, you may still need to do some advocacy around this, but at least it's there to build on. If it's not on the IEP, then you're going to have to take 2 steps backwards and get back to that. Okay, next slide. Travel time. This is a really interesting one, and we get a lot of questions about this. Travel time is, it's reasonable and it's subjective, right? So the buses can't teleport. They're not going to get a student to school faster than a car could in regular traffic. There are also buses for multiple students, not one. So unless a student is the last on the bus and the first off the bus, you need to factor in time for the bus to be picking up other students and dropping off other students. Usually this is calculated within the borough. Well, sorry, I'm saying that wrong. The rules are a little bit different for students traveling within the same borough. So they live and go to school in the same borough, out of borough, but still within one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. It looks a little bit different if the student is traveling out of New York City altogether. And for that, there's something called the Standard Operating Procedure Manual, which is sort of the rule book for how special education works in the schools. Under the SOPM, the Standard Operating Procedure Manual, a student placed by their parent in a private or a religious school. So we're talking today, let me go back for a sec. We're talking about students in public schools, and we're talking about students in non-public schools. Either they're pursuant to sort of an IEP, a team decision that they can be better served somewhere else, or students who have been placed in a non-public school by their parents. So for students with disabilities placed by their parents in private or religious schools up to 50 miles, that's this third bullet, from the student's residence, and who receive a special education program and or related services similar to those recommended by the DOE, they need to be provided with suitable transportation to and from school. Something similar for the last bullet here, the SOPM, that Standard Operating Procedure Manual, also mentions that limited bus rides for those who need less than 60 minutes, so limited travel time, on their bus can be requested. And the assumption here is that if at all feasible, that will be provided for 60 minutes or less, with the submission of appropriate medical forms and all of that. Limited travel time isn't something that any parent can ask for, but it is based, again, on the student's disability, on their needs, on their specific travel needs, and how they fare on the bus for any long distances. I will tell you, as a sort of aside here, when we check in with the Department of Education about what that reasonable and subjective travel time might look like, we are told that there are internal guidelines. They are not parent-facing. If in doubt, ask is our best advice on this. If you think that your child needs a shorter bus ride, you should be talking to their providers, both in school and out of school, their medical providers, and you should be making the request and submitting the request for a shorter bus ride or a different bus ride, sort of referencing back to the last slide. I think that's all I want to say here. Let's go to the next. Okay, pre-K special education busing looks a little bit different. All students in pre-K classes who are either pre-K special education classes, so where all of the students in the class have special education needs, or in special classes and integrated settings, which look like school-aged ICT classes. So some of the students have special ed needs, some of them do not. All of those pre-K students are entitled to specialized transportation. Those families don't need to make the same sort of request at their IEP meeting. It should still be listed on the IEP, even though the student is entitled to it. As I keep saying, sort of, if it's on the IEP, it's a lot easier to enforce, but just know that this is an automatic right. The IEP does, however, need to list any of those accommodations that I talked about a few slides ago. They are entitled to busing, but they are not automatically entitled to the various accommodations that may or not be available. Children in specialized pre-K and early intervention programs, which this slide is not specifically about, get automatic specialized busing, plus an approved child safety restraint system, a CSRS. I'm very bad with acronyms. Basically a car seat or an integrated seat when necessary. So not every child gets it, but if they need it, they get it. Assistance to be properly secured in that seat, and an attendant who remains on the bus at all times. So there's always somebody besides the driver who's going to be there on the bus. All right, let's go to the next slide and let's go back to the exceptions that we sort of referenced before. We talked about what kinds of exceptions exist, but now let's talk about how to get it. There is an exceptions request form when I am not talking, because I am a terrible multitasker. I am going to add into the notes here some of these links, but as Liliana said before, all of the links when we send you the PowerPoint are going to be live, but if you want to look at them sooner, go for it. There is an exceptions request form that families will need to fill out if they believe that their student is entitled to get busing under one of those exemptions on the slide before. Basically, fill out the form. If you don't hear back, you're going to follow up at this email address, the busing exceptions at schools.nyc.gov. There is no need to request an exception if it's already listed on the IEP. So the last few slides we talked about, those are for kids with special ed needs. We're talking now about all of the other exceptions that we listed out before. Foster care, preschool students, not preschool students, students in temporary housing, students in shelters, there's a long list, right? Thank you, Liliana, for putting that in. Let me just, yeah. You can get help with these, especially if the student is living in a shelter situation or doubled up, from folks at the school and from folks in the shelters if they're in a shelter, or for students in foster care with their contacts again at the school or their foster care coordinators. Kids who don't get this exception, I think I said it before, but they will automatically be entitled to an Omni card. It's not the same as busing, obviously, but it is pretty expansive and increasingly expansive. And those are going to be obtained from the school. Now is a good time for us to look and see if you have asked questions here on this that we haven't done. So give me a second.
Yeah. So we have a few questions that I thought would be good to share. Can you hear me? Okay.
Yep.
So the first is, my son has an IEP and door-to-door and specialized busing. He has transitioned to kindergarten, and during his transition to kindergarten IEP, the parent requested a small bus and was assured that it was added to the IEP, and it wasn't. I got the forms needed completed by the doctor to get a small bus added and requested a reconvene. There's no sense of urgency, and to date, it doesn't seem like there is a bus in place. Is there anything that she can do to ensure that a bus comes to pick them up?
Yeah, sorry, that's for me. Okay.
Yes, that's for you.
Okay.
Sorry.
So a couple things. you're going to want to check, and it sounds like you are checking. I get it, that there's no sense of urgency. So first of all, offline, if you reach out to us, we can probably help you escalate that. But today is all about empowering parents to do this themselves as well. So a couple things. Sorry. Okay, you're going to need to work with your IEP team to make sure that it gets added back. You want to reach out at, I can't tell from this if your student is in a DOE school or in a non-public school, but if they're in a DOE school, work with the IEP team at the school. If they're in a non-public school, work with the CSE. Ask for not just a reconvene meeting, but a emergency reconvene meeting, and reach out to them daily. This is one of those things where you're going to have to be an aggressive advocate. You can also reach out to, and I think I'm going to put it in the email, you can reach out to the Office of Special Education. There's an email address, specialeducation@schools.nyc.gov. I will put it in when I stop talking.
I'll put it in.
Oh, thank you. They will help you with that as well. They'll reach out to the CSE team and expedite it. If you use exactly the description that you put here, they should understand the urgency of that. It's also possible to call them, but to be honest, I find it's faster emailing them. And you will get from them an acknowledgement that they've received it and that they're working on it. They may or may not get it resolved immediately, but this is really about having it on the IEP. So it's a great example of sort of the overlap of OPT and special ed. It's all still the DOE though, so they need to be working together to make that work. I hope that answers that. If not, put a little bit more in the Q&A and we can talk about it. All right, are parents, guardians of children in foster care entitled to Omni cards as well? They are, asked for those at the school. Is there a contact person to speak to at OPT? I have 5 complaint numbers since the start of school. No one has gotten back to me. Okay. There are, we're going to talk about this in a little bit. There are a couple different ways to reach out to OPT. Brand new this year. Families can now file complaints online. This is definitely one of those things that we might be able to help you connect with somebody. So if you reach out to our helpline, and I'm pretty sure that the helpline number was in our initial slides, they will actually probably share the information with me, and I will try to connect you with an individual at OPT.
All right. I think we're going to move on. We have another place marker for Q&A, so don't worry, we'll get to all the questions if Maggie doesn't get to them now. So now it's my turn though. We're going to be talking about the New York City Schools account very quickly, because this is central to your being able to gather information and also to place complaints. Things that you should know about the New York City School account: it is a parent portal. It has a ton of information. It is especially important for families of students who do not have an IEP recommended busing, who may have an exceptions request, because they would have to have a New York City Schools account, a NYCSA account, to be able to make arrangements, okay? The NYCSA account is, like I said, a parent portal. It is not the My Schools account that you use for applying to elementary, middle, or high school. It is a completely separate account. The Department of Education has been favoring going online for a lot of things, so they're really shifting towards a more web-based support. The NYCSA account is available via mobile app or on a desktop, so you can use both. When you go, this is what you see first. You say, "Welcome to New York City Schools account." On the top right side, if you are not a native English speaker or favor a different language, you can always seek to translate the whole page just by clicking on the button that I just circled on the top. And then you go in. I'll show you what it looks like when you get in, but if you don't have an account already and you need to create an account, there's easy to follow instructions on the New York City Public Schools website. You are going to need a creation code. I don't know why they called it a creation code. I think it's hysterical that they did. But what it is really just to verify and certify that you are the parent of a student who goes to a New York City public school. So there are different ways in which you can get a creation code. One is through a letter that they send out, but you can also visit the school in person or have a meeting online, a virtual meeting, to receive a temporary password, and then you can set up your account. It's actually relatively easy to do. But if you have any difficulties, you can always call us. We can try to help you out. Once you get into your New York City student account, and like I said, the Department of Education has an easy to follow instruction. It even has pictures. Um, you can then include all your children. If you have more than one child, you can include all your children under the same account. This account has 2 children. And what you're going to want to do then in this case is to go to My Student, select the student that you are looking information for whom you're looking information, and then you click on My Student, and then you go into the NYCSA portal. As you can see, there's a lot of things that you can click on, but what we really want you to do is to go to transportation, okay? Why is NYCSA important? Because OPT is not going to share a route via email. They're not going to share a route over the phone. They're not going to give you contact information or bus company information over the phone. You are going to have to look at this portal and find your transportation here. If you do not have a pre-existing NYCSA account, you can complete the form as guest. If you're entering a request for information or an exceptions request, I will show you how to do that later. And then you can reference the number that's provided at the time. But for more, for parents who do have a NYCSA portal, then you can just find out all information here, okay? Now, the NYCSA portal will give you all this. Once you click on it, you should have pickup time, route number, drop-off location, drop-off time, bus company name. So everything that you really need to know to be able to follow your child's bus, to make sure that it's available, to also know where you need to go and where to be when the day ends. New for, I guess for last year, they piloted this program, but really new for this year. And we've been hearing a lot of very good things about this. There is a separate bus app where you can track your child's bus. Once you have your NYCSA account set up, which is, it appears to be the center of everything, you need your New York City school account. You set that up, and then at that point you can download the app, or you can use the desktop version. They have slight variations, one and the other, and then you can log in, and this is what it looks like when you log in. You select the child that you need to track, and then you track. Tracking will commence as soon as the bus driver logs on, and they log on as soon as the bus starts moving. There is that. I think now we get back to Maggie, and I'll get into the Q&A a little bit more. So see you in just a bit. Go ahead.
Yeah, we've answered some of the questions in the Q&A. I did want to answer live. There are a couple questions about getting NYCSA access for students who are not currently in the public schools. It is doable. It does take multiple steps. The DOE is working on this. Sorry to do this, but I'm going to suggest again that you reach out to our helpline and you say to them, Maggie said on the webinar that she might be able to help with this. And then I can connect you with somebody at the DOE who has been particularly helpful getting NYCSA access for families. As I said, they are working on doing that for students in non-public schools and parentally placed programs, but they're not there yet. So let us help you with it. And then I think that was it for now. Liliana's going to answer some others while I pick back up. Obviously, based on all the questions that folks are asking and on the fact that we're doing today's webinar, there are all kinds of issues that come up around busing. There are a lot of students being moved around. It is big and complicated and bureaucratic for sure. So I have just put, well, Liliana was talking, I put a bunch of links in. Some of them referenced what she was on right away, but most of them were sort of more about the stuff I'm talking about, so when you get a chance, go back and look at those. Okay, next slide. Let's talk about routing. That's probably one of the biggest problems that we see, right? Once you have transportation approved, either on your IEP or 504 plan or under one of the exceptions, now you need to get your student to school, right? So you need to know if there's a bus, you need to know when that bus is coming, you need to know who's driving that bus, etc. So the first thing you need to do is get a route number and the name of the bus company. This is why it's important. And as I was just saying, and as Liliana just said, you can get the information off of the NYC account. You can also call the transportation liaison at your school. I just answered sort of not for public, but it is true that some of those transportation liaisons don't always pick up their phone or answer their emails or know, in our experience, that they are the transportation liaison. So start with the school, but then there are other ways to get the information. The bus company is supposed to call you with the pickup time and give you information about who they are. All of these are possible ways to do it. The next thing you want to do is you want to check to make sure that any accommodations that you applied for and that got approved on the IEP are actually going to be in place, right? So does what you're seeing on NYC match what is on your IEP, right? Are the accommodations for transportation the same thing that your team agreed to? Does the IEP show those needs, right? And then you can ask the bus company when they call, is our bus going to be able to provide those accommodations? It is the goal that they should. If they can't, then you're going to need to look for another route. If there are problems, and we're giving you the same information that we follow when we handle cases, you're going to start with the transportation coordinator, and then you're going to reach out to OPT. This is a tough one because OPT won't give out route information. So they'll take a complaint number. They will talk to you. You can call them daily if you want. You should call them daily. We recommend that you do if the problems are continuing day after day. But you can file a complaint with them. And when you do, make sure that you get an incident number for it. We're already into the school year, but families should have heard from before the start of the school year from their bus companies with bus routes. We're still hearing from some families that their students are not routed. There's no information on NYC. So those families are calling their school and they're calling OPT. There was something here I really wanted to share with you guys. Just on the accommodations and the medical information, I know I'm repeating myself, but you want to make sure that it is super, super, super clear on the IEP what the student needs. And then, as I said before, it really is important if the bus doesn't come or if the bus comes late or if there is a problem with the route and the bus isn't following the route that they have been told that they should be following and that has been figured out ahead of time. All of those are things that you can complain about if your child is getting picked up too early, if they're spending too much time on the bus, if they are getting to school after the start of the school day. I haven't heard any yet this year, but we used to get calls about kids being picked up before the end of the school day. Hopefully we'll never get one of those again. No student should ever be pulled out. But any of those are things that you can reach out both to your transportation coordinator and to the customer service folks at OPT. Okay, next slide is a little more, we wanted to talk a little bit about the no route assigned. So if busing isn't IEP mandated, you want to check and make sure that the family has actually requested the exception. In those links that I gave you before, one of those was for the exception form. It's not automatic. It's really important to remember that. If it is IEP mandated, you want to make sure that all of the addresses in the system are correct. I just saw a case this morning where the wrong address was inputted into the system. So the student was routed A, to a place where they don't live, and B, you know, it just didn't work. They actually lived close enough, but they shouldn't have to be walking over there. So making sure that everything is correct in the system. OmniCards, I know we've said this a couple times, but they're always available as a backup both to students and one of the questions I answered in the Q&A before was to parents as well. And that is true for kids who are in foster care and kids who are living in temporary housing or doubled up or anything along those lines. Ride share. Let's talk about that on the next slide. Ride share is a way of basically it is a voucher-like system that enables students and their parents who don't have busing that they should have. So all of the stuff we've been talking about is in place, but the student doesn't yet have a bus within certain timelines. I'll talk about that in a second. Or they have a mandated paraprofessional or nurse who's supposed to ride with them, but the Office of Special Ed and the schools have not yet identified one. For those families, the families can get a code. They can use a car service, Limosys specifically. They don't have to put the money out up front. The DOE pays for it. It's pretty automatic. So a family doesn't need to have the resources up front to make this work. We'll also talk in a second about what can be done around that. Rideshare is great when it works as a interim step. It is not a long-term solution. Does the student have an IEP that mandates busing, or are they a student in temporary housing or foster care who require busings, or a student, I believe, although I actually want to confirm this, who qualifies under any of the other exceptions? Are there staff coverage issues around busing? So there's no driver on the bus on a given day, or the para or the nurse hasn't been assigned, or they're absent, or another mandated staff member isn't there. Is there a delay in assigning a route? As I said, I'll talk about this in a second, but routes don't start on day one. The OPT gets time to make the arrangements. And if yes to any of the above, the student should be eligible for rideshare. For those students who don't have a para or a nurse yet, there's going to be a pre-populated code on their NYC account. They can use that code again and again and again any day that the nurse or the para is not available. Okay, next slide, please. I want to go a little bit deeper into the timelines. So if no IEP mandated busing, for students who qualify under one of the exceptions to special education, OPT has 15 business days. So not 15 calendar days, but 15 business days to get that busing in place. Until then, the family can get an OmniCard, but they don't have a right to ride share. For IEP mandated busing, similar, but they have 7 business days after the address is updated in CSIS. This is really important because we're also seeing a lot of cases right now where there are delays to updating the address in CSIS. Those families aren't eligible under current DOE policy for rideshare. They are, as I said, eligible for OmniCards, but the clock doesn't start ticking essentially on this until their address has been updated in CSIS. So if that is the case, you want to work really closely with your school and or your CSE, depending on where your student is attending school. Important notes, an adult needs to ride with the student. This is not a babysitting service. I hate to use that term, but you cannot put a student in a car with a driver on their own, no matter how great the strengths of that student are, but you need an adult. It doesn't have to be the parent, but it has to be a responsible adult to ride with them. That adult will be able to get a ride back home in the same car, but they do have to ride with the student to and from school. So they also need to get to the school at the end of the day to pick up the student. And there are not going to be any IEP accommodations, right? This is a stopgap measure when some of the accommodations are not in place. So there's no para or nurse. You can still use rideshare during that time, but there's still not going to be a para or a nurse available. Okay, booking rideshare. IEPs mandating transportation paras or nurses who aren't available, as I said before, should see a code in NYCSA. That is a newish development and a great one. Others should work with their school's transportation coordinator, assuming they can figure out who that is. As I said, sometimes it's complicated in figuring that out. You can always reach out to the main office at the school and ask, who is my transportation coordinator? Can you connect me to them? Can you give me their number? All of that. Once a family has the code in hand, they're going to book this directly through the TRIPS link. And I previously put that link in the chat as well. There is a website. The link I put in the chat is really long. I couldn't figure out how to shorten it. Or they can call directly at this number, 212-426-8000. Rideshare can be used, as I think I just said, for 2 trips or 4 rides, right? So the parent can go, parent or other adult will go with the student to school, get themselves back home, or to work, and then same at the end of the day, they can get themselves to the school to pick up the student, and then ride back with them. The voucher code is going to be the same for all, and just like I was saying around something else earlier today, the drop-off spot in the morning, the school, and the pickup spot at the end of the day need to be the same spot. So this is not for a student to go to school and then to, even though I know that there are, and we do other trainings on this, but if the student is going for outside related services or something, as long as they're picked up from the school and dropped off at a location where that RSA is being used, that's fine, but they have to be dropped off at school and picked up from school. Okay, if all else fails, and I sort of hinted at this, families can also take their students to school, pay for it, and then fill out a transportation reimbursement form. We've also given you that link. This is, as the slide says, sort of a DIY solution where families are paying upfront for transportation and then seeking reimbursement. It is really, really, really important that receipts for this are kept and notes are kept on why you needed to take car fare on your own, right? So did the bus not show up? Was the nurse or para not there? What was the reason that your student was using a car, a paid for car, and then keep those receipts. You're going to need them when you fill out the form. And I do want to caution that it can take a really long time to get reimbursed. So rideshare is a really important option. It's why we did those slides first. With rideshare, families don't have to put the money out first, but the DOE is going to pay it directly. I think it is Liliana's turn next, but are there open questions that you want me to answer first, Liliana?
Yes, there is only one. Let's see. So I think you covered most of the ones that parents had written about. They said, my child is currently in a District 75 school, but currently in the process of transitioning into an NPS in the next few weeks. However, on the IEP, I have all transportation accommodations in place, limited travel, climate control, transportation para. I wanted to know if the para who currently travels with him could be staffed for his new bus, or would I have to wait for the Department of Education to staff a new para? And what happens if they cannot find staff in the time before the start of a new year?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. If it's going to depend on the para and their availability. If it's a para that was arranged because they work at the school that your student is currently in, then probably not, because they will need to get back from the bus to the school where they work. If it was a para that was separate from the school, there's a good chance that they will continue if they came from an agency or something like that. So it's going to be a very individualized question. I understand your eagerness to have somebody that knows your student already, and I hope it works out. I also saw that somebody put in the chat that they have seen families wait for up to 2 years to get reimbursed So in the last slide that I was talking about, it really does take a long time. So if you can use the rideshare option, I strongly encourage it. Okay.
And I
There we
second
are.
that. Yeah, it's my turn now. Thank you, Maggie. So I'm going to talk a little bit about places where you can enter online complaints and places where you can also make a request. Earlier, we talked about the NYC account. This is somewhat related, although having a NYC account is important to enter an online complaint. You don't need to have one. You can also enter a guest as a complaint. So let's say you're tired of calling people. You have a ton of different complaint numbers and you're getting nowhere. This is another place where you can turn to. So Department of Education has a website called supporthub.schools.nyc, which is like a self-help, self-serve, self-help hub of information. It is meant to be question and answer. So sort of like you have a common question, a Q&A, they'll try to find information for you so you can resolve the issue. But there is also a system that allows the users to create and submit a help desk ticket. So this is the hub, and this is what it looks like. Now I put it in Spanish because I wanted to highlight that you can translate this into any language that's available in Google, there are plenty of languages available in Google these days. You can also initiate your NYC portal session by clicking on that button or the green button right here where it says start session to begin. So this one, so you can do one of that. You can also just log in, just go into I am a student family, and that's where you want to go to start getting questions. Now on the bottom right, you'll see that there is like a little owl. The owl is their chatbot, Eureka. You can also translate Eureka. To have Eureka speak your language, all you have to do is write in your language, and Eureka will auto-identify your language and then speak with you in that way. Now, so how can we help you? In this case, we go to transportation right there, click on that. And then what is it that you're looking for? Exceptions is one, OPT forms. This is where we're going to go because we're not really looking for general information. We're looking for problem solving. And in this case, you can see that there are a ton of different topics that are already in there. I need help to add an alternate afternoon drop-off. I want to submit a complaint about a bus company. My bus arrived late, etc. In this case, we have selected I'm having problems with my child's current school bus just because it was the most catch-all that we could find in this. So then I clicked on that, and they're trying to give you a little bit of information as to how to resolve the issue by giving you links to other places where you can find information. And you go to the links and you find what you need, that's great. But if not, you can create a ticket. So instead of having to call someone, wait on the phone, and have to experience that, not everybody has all the time in the world to do this. You can also do this after hours. When you have a moment, you can create a ticket. It's going to automatically request that you log into your NYC account, or it's going to ask you to go into guest mode. So you can fill it out as a guest and you will get a confirmation number. I recommend that you print that out and save it onto your computer so you can create a record of this. We like to say that every time there is a problem, you should create a ticket. You should make a complaint. So if the bus is late every day, contact and create a ticket, either contact OPT or create a ticket, get a complaint number every day. Of course, we don't want to have that be a continuing experience for anyone. But if it is, as Maggie said, there are some solutions that are temporary to resolve this, but what you need to really continue to do is to make sure that the Department of Education is aware that this is a continuing issue, and that's how you do it. I'm going to now do a brief review. Now we're entering the end of our webinar, so let's just review 1 second. Remember that busing is available if it's mandated on the IEP. If you need IEP mandated busing and it is not on the IEP, there are ways to resolve that. The main one really is to create, to have another meeting to put it on, but if it was a clear clerical issue, then this is something that you can possibly resolve contacting the CSC. If there are exceptions that apply, such as if you're in temporary housing or if a student in foster care, busing is available to you. If you are distance eligible and the school provides yellow bus services, you will have a bus. And remember, if you're eligible for busing, you're also eligible for student Omni cards while you're waiting for busing. Okay. Now, I don't know, Maggie, if you want to chime in on some of these, but we have a ton of transportation resources, and we wanted to tell you first in our tip sheet. The first one on the green is we have a ton of helpful information to tell you about what to do for common questions, common issues that arise. Example, the bus company has the wrong address for your family, your student is badly treated on the bus, or you're having issues with other students on the bus. If you have safety concerns as well, this is one where we would suggest that you take a look at. It's available on our website, or you can click it straight through here. We might put the link on the chat in this. And then
Yep.
they have the Office of Pupil Transportation parent-facing information, which is, they have secret information. We said that they have their own guidelines and policy that they may not share with the public, but they have a ton of public-facing information. If a student is eligible for busing based on their IEP, student in temporary housing or foster care status, they may be eligible transportation reimbursement. If their bus doesn't show up or if the services are delayed beyond the 10 school days, as Maggie had mentioned before. If you have to spend money on transportation, remember to save your receipt, submit a request for reimbursement. If you're interested in the prepaid timeshare, follow the instructions that we mentioned before, but all this information should be also available on the OPT's parent-facing information. You can also contact us on our website and take a look at what we have new. Sometimes we have news alerts, or you can sign up for newsletters. And also the Department of Education has plenty of updates. They have a section that you can click on what's new, and it'll give you just the most recent propositions that they have. And finally, the Office of Special Education is an important resource for transportation. I don't know if you needed to add anything to that, Maggie.
No, that's perfect. I have been, while Liliana was talking, I put back in some of those earlier links, plus one for the Office of Special Ed. I know they're on our slides. I just want you all to have them right away if you're eager to get to work after this.
Yes, and most of these are available online. We just wanted to put them in the one place so that you can have them all together. So transportation reimbursement, they're self-explanatory. Early childhood busing, special education, and busing exceptions, all with the same at schools.nyc.gov. These are places where you can send your concerns, especially if sometimes when you make a phone call, you have very nice people working and trying to help. This creates more of a record, if you will, and also, well, it's harder to ignore. Not that they would, but just in case, we also want to talk very briefly while we finish about language access rights. If you're a family, if you're a person whose first language is not English and you favor a different language, if you have preference for getting information in your own language, you have the right to that. You have the right to get documents translated, including report cards and IEPs, and the right to interpretation services in school meetings and events provided by the Department of Education for free. You shouldn't be using your child to translate for you. Professionals are available to do this. You can bring your own person to support you if you wish, but as I said, the Department of Education must provide translation and interpretation for meetings and for important documents. The main languages the Department of Education serves are listed here: Spanish, French, Arabic, Chinese, Bengali, Urdu, Russian, Korean, and Haitian Creole. However, if you do not speak one of these languages, the Department of Education still has to offer translation and interpretation services for you for free, even if your child is not an English language learner, okay? Complaints with translation and interpretation, email hello@schools.nyc.gov, or you can call the New York City Public Schools complaint line. I think at this point we're just reaching questions. Yeah, go ahead. Maggie, did you have something to say?
Oh, no, I'm sorry.
No, don't be. So we're reaching questions. This is your time to enter questions into the Q&A and final thoughts. And while we do that, we might stop the recording to answer questions that may come in live if we don't see any written in the Q&A. And I'm going to launch a few polls for those who are here, but you can also scan our code and take our survey. Let us know how we did. So for those of you, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, and we've been answering questions as they've come in. If you have something that is very personal and you don't want to put it in there, I urge you to call our helpline.
That too. Yes, thank you. And that's actually a really good reminder that our helpline is toll-free Monday through Thursday, 10 to 4. You can also email us at info@advocacyforchildren.org. You can go to our website and fill out a get help form with your question, and we will answer that as soon as possible. I'm going to pause recording here. If you're listening through our recorded webinar, thank you so much for joining us. I hope this was of help. Please reach out to us if you have any questions or concerns about this, and stay tuned for additional webinars in the near future.